I think many of you know me. For those that don't, I'm David Harper. I'm managing principal and owner of a firm called the Advisory Alliance. We're based here in Savannah. We are the oldest leadership consulting and development firm in coastal Georgia and the Low Country. I've been told that we are the oldest firm of that sort east of Atlanta as well. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be here with Jeff Bush. I came to know Jeff back in 2015 when Parker's engaged our firm to put together a leadership development program for all of Parker's district managers. These are the men and women that oversee Parker's stores and store managers in a given territory. Jeff served as point person for Parker's in the build out of this program, which was a multi-month program. And I was very impressed when I met Jeff and was most impressed with his leadership throughout the entire program. And he was really instrumental and fundamental in ensuring the impact of the program at Parker. So when we thought of doing a program like this, Jeff was one of the first people that I thought of. Before we get started, I'd like to give just a bit of background on Jeff. Jeff Kent spoke a bit about Jeff. Jeff Bush is president of Parker's Convenience Stores, where he oversees the daily operations of 66 stores in Georgia and South Carolina. I believe, Jeff, when we were working together back in 2015, it was in the high 30s. So So that bit of an indication of the kind of growth that they have had. Jeff also directs their Fueling the Community charitable program, which is given back to every community where Parker's operates, supporting local schools, hospitals, and other causes. Jeff graduated as a cum laude presidential scholar from Georgia Southern with a BA in economics in 2013. As Jeff Kent noted, he served as a staff sergeant and forward observer in the U.S. Army, including 2 deployments in Iraq. He was awarded the General Aubrey Red Newman Award for Leadership Excellence and was selected as NCO of the Year for Fort Stewart. During his military tenure, he earned the Combat Action Badge, Iraqi Campaign Medal, and 14 other awards and medals. Jeff has also owned several small businesses in the past, opening his first when he was 14, and then his second when he was only 16. He was named to the Georgia Southern University Alumni Association's 40 Under 40, Savannah's Generation Next Rising Stars Under 40, the Convenience Store Decisions 40 Under 40 Leaders to Watch, Savannah Magazine's Savannah New Guard, and Convenience Store News Future Leader of Convenience. So Jeff Bush, welcome to Leaders Leading and the Savannah CFO Council.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Jeff Kent, for having me.
So let's start at the beginning. You grew up in Lewes, Delaware. I didn't know where Lewes, Delaware was, so I had to go look on the map. So for those that also may not know where Lewes, Delaware is, so here's where it is. Perhaps you can share with us what was it like growing up in Lewes, Delaware?
So I was the oldest of 7 boys, and we grew up in a I would say a very poor, historically farming family. My dad did a bunch of different things, drove tractor trailer, did logging, and worked in the ice plant. And so I'll tell you though, we grew up really poor, and we grew up on a piece of property where our whole family lived. My grandfather and his brothers had houses down the road, and then parallel running down the property was all the houses of our cousins and aunts and uncles and all that. So we had an interesting upbringing, very family oriented, and at the time we didn't know how poor we were. So our parents did a great job of sort of take care of us and doing what had to be done to make ends meet.
And then you were the oldest, right, of 7 boys?
Yeah, the oldest of 7 boys.
Yeah. So what was that like? I was involved in a family of 5 boys, but I can't imagine being in a family of 7 boys. So what was it like being the oldest?
There was never a lack of controlled chaos. I'll try to be a little fair. There was always a football game or a baseball game or something to go play in the backyard. Being the oldest, I'll tell you, I might be jumping ahead a little bit. My parents got divorced when we were young, and so I sort of had to fill this role of being mature faster than I wanted to. And so a lot of times I was at home taking care of my brothers and trying to do a lot of that stuff. But I'll tell you, I got a great bunch of brothers and great family, and things have since settled down. But at the time, it was a lot of fun.
Okay, cool. From research, you attended Cape Henlopen High School.
Yep, and I'll tell you, I just saw that a couple years ago. That is not what it looked like when I was there. I wish it did.
I was going to ask you if the school looked like this back in 2004.
No, we got to visit Delaware a few years ago, visit family, and we went and seen it, and I was blown away.
Very cool. By the way, I should just let people know, if you have a question for Jeff, please put it in the chat box and either select the everyone function or direct it to Jeff Kent. And so Jeff, feel free to jump in with questions.
Will do. I'm watching it.
Very good. So with regard to school, did you like school? Were you a good student?
No, I was not a good student, and in high school, I didn't like school. And as you actually noted a little bit, David, my time at the time, I'll tell you, was really highly focused on starting a business and working through a business in high school. Coming from the family that I came from, I knew that, well, let's say this, in my heart at the time, it was more about hard work than it was about good grades. Obviously, I don't take that approach with my kids, but I'll tell you at the time, I really thought it was about hard work and sort of breaking the mold. I didn't want to work for anybody else, even at a young age, and I was not focused on school at all. And maybe I should have been in hindsight, but I was not.
Okay, but you did end up doing a circle back later on, which we will get to later on.
Yes,
as well.
Yes. I'll tell you just a quick synopsis. 9th and 10th grade was not a focused year for me. Once I realized coming to my sophomore and senior years, I had to fix my grades. You actually can see, if you look at my records, all of a sudden my grades start coming up. So I'm a man who operates well under pressure, at least.
Did you have a favorite subject at all? Or was there something that you loved?
100%, all day, every day, math, yeah.
Come easy to you?
Yes, that's, for some reason, that's always been something that I could understand. Science is my weak point. I'm not good when it comes to science and explaining things on a scientific level, but I love math because I knew there was typically one absolute answer. And that always excited me, of knowing there was a right and a wrong. I don't know why that appealed to me.
But basically sort of like a standard that you either met or that you didn't meet, right?
Yes, yeah. I knew if I was doing it right or wrong.
Okay. What about sports? Did you take part in any sports, or was there time for sports or after school activities?
A lot of different sports. And I'll tell you, it's funny, when I came down here, one of the sports that I played, it was not very big down here yet. It's starting to get there, was lacrosse. I played lacrosse quite often. Played football for a few years. Soccer was something I played, indoor soccer for 3 years. Played a little baseball. Played a little bit of everything. I didn't take it very serious, but I definitely played it. And especially we had high school sports, and then we also had YMCA, and we had sort of other little leagues around the area. So we played a bunch of different things. A bunch of my friends and my brothers too.
Okay. And then post high school, after a couple of years, you decided to join the U.S. Army. What led to that decision, and why the Army?
Yeah. So I'll tell you, I have a lot of family members in the military. I have 2 uncles that unfortunately passed away while they were serving in the Navy. I had another uncle that was a Marine, and then a handful of family members, a grandfather and 2 uncles in the Army. There was always, there was always a military foundation in my life, I guess is a good way of saying it. I was in ROTC in high school, and not because I had a choice, I would say it that way. I would say the family, definitely urged me that it was something important to have in my life at a minimum, even if I didn't join the military. And being focused on my businesses, there wasn't sort of this inkling of joining the military, but I stayed with ROTC all 4 years of high school. When I graduated, 9/11, let me back up, when 9/11 happened, it struck a chord with me so strong that I knew that was a changing moment, and I was going to go do something, and I didn't know what that something was going to be. And I had met an Army recruiter who just ended up being a great guy, still friends with him, believe it or not. And he just presented to me a case where I thought I could go make a difference. And so I upended my life and joined the Army, and it was an unbelievable decision, and I'd do it a million times over.
Well, to that end, we have a picture here as well. So Is there a story behind that picture? So where was that taken, and what was the context for that?
There is a story here. I'll tell you what I can say. This was around the time of what's the best way to say? This is around the time when Solder City was not being controlled, and so I was a part of a unit that we had to push into Solder City and regain control of that city. So. Yeah. And so General Petraeus came out to visit us after a very successful mission.
With regard to your time in the service, what did you enjoy about it?
So as a forward observer, even at a young rank, what I liked about the job, I'll start with that first, is that you had autonomy to a certain degree, and there was a lot of math actually involved in being a forward observer. A lot of angles, and so to back up for people who don't know, a forward observer is someone who calls for fire using either mortar, artillery. You can use helo. We can use fast movers, aircraft. And so there was something that appealed to me about that job that still to this day sticks with me. It was just a really, really fun job. A lot of four-man team actions. We'd go out ahead and set up some observation posts, and it was just a fun job. The military in general, I tell you what, the camaraderie, and Eric, I see your hats. I thank you for your service as well. The camaraderie, it's something that it's hard to even speak to it. It's hard to match, and even to this day, people that I consider closer than family came from the military, and it's just something that will always be in your heart. There'll always be that discipline in you and your mindset and that driving effort. And the thing about the military I loved the most was, again, going back to sort of the analysis about math. There was a bar, there was an answer, there was a right way to do things. There was, a black and white, this is the right way, this is the wrong way, sort of methodology of accomplishing whatever it was you're accomplishing, whether it was training or physical fitness or, learning to get promoted. And then the lasting thing, once I got put in a leadership position, the ability to develop people, the ability to motivate people, that's always been a driving passion of mine, and it still is to this day and probably will forever be. And that is something that even now in this moment makes me want to have that experience again of being back in the military, just being surrounded by people that you get to lead and you're developing. And I thrive off of having, and in an odd way of saying this, I thrive off of having the well-being of someone as my responsibility, because I see it as sort of more potential than they even realize they have sometimes. So that to me was so super exciting, getting people that would come in with a multitude of different backgrounds and ethnicities and experiences and perspectives in life, and still being able to develop them in a way that was successful.
And that was something that I noted in you back in 2015, that this wasn't something that anyone had to tell you to do or say, Jeff, it's a good idea to sort of build and grow your people, which is a fundamental aspect of leadership. And you say that's always been a part of you. Where do you think you got that? Where did you get that sense that this is important to do, but also that it's evident, from working with you, that it's something that you truly enjoy?
So at a very young age, my grandfather held a big role in my life. And so my dad was the youngest of his brothers and sisters. And my grandfather was actually retired by the time I came of age to sort of start building a relationship with him around 6 or 7 years old. Yeah. And my grandfather was one of the hardest working people I've ever met in my life. And he always taught me that there's two ways to go to be successful. And most of the ways you take and other people try to take, and when they're not successful, what they realize is they're trying to move the boulder by themselves. And so what he used to teach me is hard work and developing those around you. That's the avenue that you take to become successful. And so at a very young age, he instilled in me, we talked about it a little bit earlier when I was, put in a position to help take care of my brothers. He put me in a position of realizing that their success, basically the result of their life is reflected on me. If I can keep them out of trouble, that means I must be doing a good job being the leader of the pack there. So it was something at a young age, I don't know why, it just spoke to me. When he would put it in a position where I realized that, I could help others be successful, and in turn, that would allow me to be more successful. I realized that this was something that really just spoke to me. And I love seeing people succeed. I'll tell you my favorite story in the military, bar none. And take all the military, take all the wartime stuff out. This is going to be a really odd story for a guy that deployed direct twice to tell you that was my favorite story. But I got promoted, or excuse me, I got selected for NCO of the Year, Fort Stewart. And what happened was that set me on a path to realize that that was fun and that was great and it was a lot of hard work, but who else can I get there? Who else can I get through that process? How can I get someone else in that same position and push them further than what I went and what I was capable of doing? The very next year, I took one of my soldiers and worked him through the whole process. It takes over a year. And by the end of 14 months, he got selected as a Soldier of the Year for Fort Stewart. And that to me that's my crowning achievement. I'll tell you, it's my crowning achievement. It takes someone who he thought inherently 100% was not possible for him to even hit a physical fitness test score that would put him even in the running to even be in the qualifier for things. And we studied and we worked and we outside on the outside of Army hours, so to speak. It was day in and day night we were together, and it made this lasting impression on me that that was my crowning achievement, was getting someone else to a level of success that I was and help him surpass that level of success.
Now, you decided ultimately to leave the service and go back to college. Now, there was a bit of a transition that you were attending college while you were in the service. So what prompted you to think about going back to college?
So actually, I was a lifer. I wasn't trying to get out of the military. And it's funny you have this picture up. So shortly after this picture, I was given an opportunity to become an officer. And I was given an opportunity to go green to gold. What that means is you go from an enlisted soldier to a commissioned officer by going to college. Because of the situation in the first deployment, that wasn't able to come to fruition. So when we came back for our second deployment, towards the latter half of our first deployment was 18 months, second deployment was 16. Towards the latter half of the second deployment, I revisited that opportunity to see if it was going to still be available for me. And believe it or not, this gentleman on the left here, he helped push it through and got me into college. And unfortunately, I was injured, and in the second deployment, still tried to make the transition. That did not work. I got med boarded out, and I decided, okay, well, I was already in college when the paperwork came through. I was in my first semester, actually. And this is the only way to say it, is I literally said to myself, it's time to put your big boy pants on. It's time to get back, time to get into the real world and figure out what this thing is all about. So I started off on this journey of going to college with, at the time, to be honest with you, no general path of figuring out what I wanted to do and how I was going to do it. So the first couple months of college was a little scary. Transitioning from the military in general is a tough transition. And for me, in the matter of 2 weeks, I had boots on the ground in Iraq, and 2 weeks later, I was sitting in a classroom. And so it was a bit of a journey, and something that I got to tell you, I had so many supporters between my wife and friends and family, and my favorite professor, Dr. Richard McGrath at University or Georgia Southern now, really helped with that transition and helped me sort of on a personal level and sort of a career level, trying to figure out how do you do this and how do you go about it.
What advice would you have for those who are transitioning or thinking of transition, of leaving the service to come back to civilian life? I've worked with leaders like that, and there obviously is it's a bit of a shift.
I would say that, and I know this is sort of maybe a little basic in its approach, but and maybe a little hokey, but one day at a time is the only way you can do it. You got to eat bite-sized bites, one day at a time. You never know what's going to come at you that you're not ready for, you're not expecting. And the second thing I would say is develop a support group around you, especially those that have been through it, have been through the process. Maybe a career guy who's retired and he's doing something else, and so he has not only career experience in the military, but he has career experience outside of the military, someone with life experience. And something that's always been near and dear to my heart is establishing mentors. David, as you know, you're one of my mentors, and I have this habit of just finding people who are in a position in life that I see them as successful in some avenue, and I want to learn from them. So that was a big thing that got me through, was I started establishing these pocket of mentors in different areas of my life that I wanted to improve.
Then for someone maybe who didn't focus as much on school and high school, but for obvious reasons you'd mentioned, you certainly applied yourself in college. Dean's List 4 or 5 times, GPA 3.82. So what was the difference between that and where you were previously?
So, going into college, the biggest sort of ripping the Band-Aid off moment that led me to say, I got to figure this out and I got to do it right, was when I got those papers for med board, and I was sitting in the major's office, and I remember he opened the papers and he just shook his head. And so I knew in my gut, I knew what was about to happen. He looked at me and said, this isn't going to end well. I believe you're going to end up being out of the military. And so that day, I literally went in the parking lot, sat in the parking lot, and at this moment, got to put in perspective, I had 2 kids and I was married. And I was thinking, okay, I'm the sole provider for this family. I got to figure this out. And so the driving force behind it was my wife and kids. And I sat down and said, okay, I'm by far, much older than all these folks here at the college. Right. And so that means I'm behind the curve now. And I got kids and a wife. And I said, okay, so I got to figure out not only how to put my head down and get this done, but how to do it successfully and put myself in a position to be as successful as possible, because in turn, I know that's how I'm going to best take care of my family. So that was the driving force, was just understanding that my kids' future really depended on it.
Well, now, while you were finishing up college, you ended up joining Parker's in December of 2012.
Yeah.
How did you learn of Parker's, and why did you decide to apply?
So it's interesting. So when I was in college, so that same moment of sort of that moment of clarity of figuring out I need to buckle down here with college, I realized I got to get this thing done in 2 years. That was my timeline for myself. And the professors told me it wasn't possible. And I said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to double semester. I'm going to go all summer. I'm going to do this. However, also at the same time, I needed money. So I started my own business again. I actually had 3 businesses by the time I graduated. Andrew, not nearly to your level of success, but I was doing web design and networking and those sort of things, and started a landscape business again. I started doing advertising for the newspaper, and I became the business manager for the Inkwell, at the time Armstrong's newspaper, and showed them how they can actually start turning a profit. In the meantime, I started doing some freelance research and research projects using my economics degree. At that time, I was only about 6 or 8 months into the degree. And I started doing some research for CETA. And through working with CETA, I started hearing this name, Greg Parker. Now, I was always a fan of Parker's, being down in Fort Stewart. But at this point, this was sort of an opportunity where I realized, okay, this guy's got, some success around here that I want to understand. And actually, I wasn't looking for a job. I was just wanting to understand, again, going back to the mentorship piece, how could I just at least get myself in a position to have a conversation? Mm-hmm. I became the president of the Economics Association for Armstrong, and one of my first responsibilities was trying to establish a speaker to come for the next quarter. And I was talking to one of the professors, and I had floated the name Greg Parker past him, and he said, well, I'll reach out and see what we can get done. To my surprise, Greg actually responded and said, absolutely, I'd love to do it. And so that set up this moment where Greg came in to present, and right, wrong, or indifferent, I just put a barrage of questions out there while he was presenting, kept interrupting. And the short version is he offered me a job shortly after.
Well, we have the photo of the press announcement. And so now I do have, I noted that there are bars on the inside of what looks like a room, and then there are these I'm not sure that
yeah.
I believe that's taken outside of the Parker's office. Is that correct?
Yes, that was outside. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So you joined Parker's, and you became director of fuel management along the way. All right. What does? Yeah. But before we do that, for the few people that don't know about Parker's, can you just share with us what is Parker's?
Sure. So we're a regional convenience store company that Greg, like Jeff was saying earlier, Greg established in 1976. He built one store in Midway, Georgia in 1976. We're now 44, almost 45 years old, and we got 66 stores, 42 kitchens. And we're not your typical, what I would refer to as gas station model. We're a convenience store plus. We focus highly on food service, with all made from scratch food. And our whole thing is cleanliness and customer service, speed of transaction, and obviously safety and sanitation for our employees and customers. That's always been our pillars, even before, what's transpired this year. And so for us, cleanliness has been the top #1 pillar of our company for a long time. And what happens, and I'll tell you from a customer standpoint before I joined Parker's, is that we would come back from visiting Delaware and we'd stop at Parker's knowing it was clean and well lit and safe and secure. And Greg has built an unbelievable and very sustainable business model out of it. And so we're a company that we just focus on our employees and focus on the customers. And, you know, I tell everybody, you know, the internal saying is employees first, customers always. And that's just been, you know, something that we hold near and dear to our heart. So we've made I've become part of a team that has built a very successful business.
There we go, as a picture there. You were a director of fuel management.
That's when I was still learning the dress.
Basically overseeing the sourcing and procurement of over 100 million gallons of fuel. That's a pretty big job. Yeah.
So when I started, I was the 11th person in the office, and I didn't know what I was getting into. I didn't know anything about this business, which I'll tell you now is one of the most complex businesses. It's kind of astonishing the things we deal with. But I got in, and I didn't really know where I was going to fit. And so what I did was I befriended someone that I saw having some difficulties that I could help solve. She was having some technical difficulties, some IT-based difficulties, and so I basically started providing her with some solutions. At the time, I was more of a field administrator, doing paperwork, invoicing, that sort of thing. And so I helped her with that, and then I started helping. I volunteered to start establishing our loyalty program. I developed our mobile app and started getting my hands in a bunch of different projects. And then eventually, Greg offered me the position of taking over the entire field department, so handling procurement and logistics, shipping and different things like that, learning trading, learning hedging, and getting into that world. And I'll tell you that it was like drinking from a fire hose for about 6 or 8 months, but it was a job that is still near and dear to my heart today, where it's a lot of fun. I still actually am involved in it. It's a lot of fun, and it's one of those things where it's a whole side of the business that I think people don't even think about, because as a customer, you sort of just pull up and expect there to be gas and it coming out of the nozzle, you know? It's an interesting and very time-consuming part of the business. It's kind of fascinating, the things that go on that side of it.
Okay. And you served in that role until 2016, and then 2016 you were made Director of Operations.
Yeah.
Was in that role for 1 year and then promoted to Chief Operating Officer in January 2017. So to go from Director of Fuel Management to Director of Ops to Chief Op, those are some serious jumps in terms of transition, in terms of the complexity of the role, the depth of responsibility. How did you manage at each of those steps those kind of transitions where there's significant jumps in terms of what you're responsible for and what you're accountable for?
The first thing, and to me, it's always been most important, is not being afraid to just say, I don't know how to do this. I'm willing to learn it, but I don't know how to do it. And so what I mean by that is, so if you recall, David, you were talking about 2015, when we started the program for the district managers. At that time, I was not a Director of Operations.
Right.
I was actually still in this fuel role. And so Greg and the team have afforded me the opportunity to start experiencing different parts of the business by that time. So I'd worked in the store, I'd gone through manager training multiple times, started getting experience in different sides of the business. And so by helping establish the program with you, David, I got even more experience into that world. And so the biggest piece I would say for me is that, just being willing to continuously learn, being willing to be agile, nimble, and never assuming that you know it all, no matter how long you've been doing it, or no matter how many times you've done it. So for me, that was the biggest thing, is just yielding and saying, look, I don't know about this side, I don't know about this piece, but I want to learn it. In regards to the promotions, it's surrounding yourself with people who can help motivate you and push you and continue to challenge you. We all set high bars for ourselves, but if you have those around you that continue to push that bar for you and help you push that bar, it's hard not to succeed. And one of the things I'll tell you here that we have that's extremely special is we have a great team that they're willing to challenge you, and they're willing to push you, and they're willing to see that potential, that sometimes you might not see in yourself. It's the same analogy I was using with the military that used to get me excited and still does today, is you see potential in someone that maybe don't see in themselves. And so I contribute a lot of my success to a lot of the people around me. But the big thing is always willing to say, look, I want to raise my hand. I want to learn. I want to figure this out. I'm willing to do it. I got the tenacity and the grit. but I'm going to learn it. You know, I need to put the time in to learn it.
So last year, January 2019, at the age of 32, you were named president of Parker's. And to my knowledge, there's only one other person on, up above from president, and that's Greg. So obviously that's an incredibly comprehensive role. So could you sort of explain what are you responsible for as president of Parker's?
Absolutely, and thank you. And I'll tell you, it was a humbling moment. Greg let me know in August 2018, so a good while before it was announced publicly. I actually didn't even tell my wife until I knew for sure it was a done deal. But I'll tell you, it was a humbling moment. This is an unbelievable organization, and to get that opportunity and to still have that opportunity is just sometimes you got to pinch yourself. But for me, the overarching most important part of it is being that sort of center cog of the wheel that makes sure, that I'm allocating resources to all the key business units, making sure that I'm building cohesion between the different executives throughout the different key business units, instilling company strategy and ensuring that filters all the way down to the day-to-day tactical operations of the company, as well as making sure we put forth policies and procedures. And, at this point, this role, you're doing more than just being involved in sort of the day-to-day operations of the C-stores, and so the umbrella becomes much bigger. But the biggest thing is making sure that you're still continuing to build that cohesion with the rest of the team on the executive leadership team. And so that's a big piece of it. We have a bunch of things we look at in regards to what we refer to as our business roadmap. And those are the big priority items we have that we want to get accomplished each year. And so a big part of my role is ensuring that the resources allocated properly to get those things accomplished and get them accomplished successfully, and that we have all the different departments that are involved, that they understand what their role is, how they're going to be held accountable, and ensuring that those things are moving along fluidly, even in the middle of a pandemic. So that's the biggest piece of the role.
And we will get to that in just a second about what it's like to run a business during a pandemic. So what is other than during a pandemic, what is the hardest thing of running a business like Parker's?
Wow, that is a great question. I'm not usually a guy that doesn't have an answer. I don't know that there is one hardest thing. I would say that maybe the thing that would come to mind first, and my gut would say is sort of the one most important thing, is that our industry, sort of the walls, if you will, of our industry are being blurred, and you're seeing these diversified service providers like your Amazons and some of the other businesses sort of starting to encroach on our business. Now, whether you're in our business or any other business, this answer is still going to hold true. But for us, most importantly, it's about being nimble and agile and being able to pivot. At the end of the day, we have buildings on good real estate. And so we always have to be open-minded looking at what does our business look like 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 years from now. And so, most important and I guess the hardest is to continue to make sure that you're not just looking at today, tomorrow, the next year, but really focusing on making sure we're setting ourselves up for success as this industry evolves and as the world evolves, with diversified fuel options and energy options, as consumer taste and preference change, and demand generally shifts across our market, we have to be able and be willing to change and be nimble and agile and ready to do so. So that's probably the hardest. It takes a lot of time, but it's also one of those things where you're not seeing direct results. And I think that's one of the challenges inherent in it as well, is that you're basically putting plans in place that might not come to fruition if 3 years from now there's a bigger pivot in the industry or something changes. Mm-hmm. And to give you some quick examples, the change in tobacco, right? I mean, the smokers and tobacco sales used to be one of the largest buckets in this industry, and now it's one of the smallest buckets in the industry. So that's a big change. Fuel diminishment, that's been happening for years now, so that's a big change. Alternative energy coming in with chargers and hydrogen and CNG and different things like that. So that's probably the most, I would say, the most accurate answer right now, and that can very well change.
Which would account for the focus on the food part of the business as opposed to the fuel part of the business, where you're seeing that increasingly as you open up more and more stores?
Absolutely, yeah.
And also the branding now you see of Parker's Kitchens, seeing that more.
Yes, and so we made a pivot into food service many, many years ago when the industry was sort of just starting to see that as an option. We decided to make a pivot to that we saw sort of, trying to be a little forward looking, we saw that was an opportunity for us. And so we already knew we had good food, and we thought, okay, let's expand on this. Let's make sure we have good breakfast. Let's make sure we have good dinner. Let's start competing with these, what I refer to as fast feeders or quick service restaurants. Well, we have a better model than they do. We have better food than they do. I really believe that. And so we said, our competitors, it's not just the gas station across the street where we're trying to separate ourselves from them. We're also competing against, these other fast feeders, national brands, that we need to start separating ourselves from them as well. So what we've seen is our competitors has also changed, in regards to who that competitor set is. Used to be, we would say the convenience stores around the corner, that's our competitors. Now we're looking at, quick service restaurants and fast feeders within the same proximity as being our competitors.
When did you first learn that COVID-19 was going to have an impact on your business, and how did you all respond to it?
The reason I smirk is because I don't know if I'll ever forget it, because it was March 9th, my birthday. I was actually out to dinner with some coworkers here, and for some reason there was just a tide that came rolling in that night at dinner, and we started putting some plans in place to start making some drastic changes to our business and our business model.
And how have you had to pivot? How have you had to change how you operate under COVID?
The biggest thing is making sure that we're doing everything in our power for safety and sanitation for our employees and our customers. I mean, that's number one, that's paramount. And that is everything from ensuring that we're being extremely flexible on our leave. If people feel even any remotely, any symptoms or sick symptoms or anything like that, we're making sure they get time off. Additionally, we're making sure we have the supplies and materials they need. We're putting up dividers at the cash wraps. We're making sure they have gloves, making sure they have masks. I mean, all those things, hand sanitizer. I mean, we had one point where people were stealing hand sanitizer from left to right. And so we're making sure that our employees had those supplies. The second thing is making sure we had what we refer to as our pandemic playbook up to date and ready, and building those what if scenarios on if an employee in a store gets sick, an employee in office gets sick, whatever the case may be, understanding what our proactive measures are and our reactive measures are to those scenarios.
Mm-hmm. And were you up and running throughout the entire time?
Yes. Yeah. We never shut down. Yeah.
How does it differ operating now versus during a hurricane? Obviously the time frame's different, but from an operations standpoint and from a leadership standpoint.
Yeah, I love that you asked that, because the good thing for us, so we're a part of a network of convenience stores across the country that we share ideas with, sort of an ideation group. And one of the things that was evident pretty quickly, I want to say even maybe before my birthday, as that being a milestone for us, was that we had such a vast experience of dealing with hurricanes. Personally for me, it goes all the way back to 2013 when I started having experience here at Parker's with hurricanes. And so we had, with me about 6-7 years, and collectively as a group, you're talking about 30+ years of dealing with hurricanes, having coastal stores. And so what was interesting is we had emergency response plans, we had supply logistics plans, working with our suppliers and vendors. It was very similar in that way, how we saw runs on product, runs on water, runs on toilet paper. We saw that during hurricanes. And so we had a great preparation and sort of phased approach that we already had prepared from hurricanes. The flip side of that is that this was what I referred to with our team as an invisible timeline. We didn't know if, when, or how things were going to happen and take place. We didn't know if it was going to be state mandated or federal mandated or local mandated. We didn't know what was going to happen. What we basically assumed was, we said, okay, this was very early on before case numbers were what I would say high. We said, okay, case numbers are going to rise. We know there's going to be COVID in our area. How are we going to react to it? And so generally speaking, there was a lot of similarities to hurricanes, but in some ways there was a lot of invisible timeline, a lot of question marks, and a lot of what ifs that we had to just talk through and work through. I don't know if you heard this analogy before, where we kept saying, look, it's like we're building a plane while we're flying it. There was part of this that we were trying to figure out as we went.
Sure. This year in particular, diversity and inclusion has become important and center of plate issues for many leaders. Can you talk about what Parker's is doing about that?
So I'll tell you the kind of backup. historically, we've always been a minority and female-dominated business, which is actually great. That's been a good thing. We've always had great diversity in our company, but one of the things we're doing is just being more understanding and trying to make sure we're having more sensing groups, and getting more feedback from our employees and our frontline employees. But we've always had a notion, actually even before I got here, that our employees need to reflect our customers. So we've always had that motto, and then understood, that our community is such a diverse community, and we're a diverse business, and that's exactly who we always will be. And so as we go through this year, for us, the things that I would say have changed is just becoming more aware, more open, engaging our employees more, and what I keep saying is strengthening the employee voice, making sure that employee's voice is heard loud and clear, and they're seeing the changes that they're expecting of us, and they're giving us the feedback, that we want and we need. We want to continue to refine our company throughout the years and become a better organization, a stronger organization. And we always want to be the best place to work. And so whatever we got to do to continue to facilitate that is what we're going to do.
You've been married for 13 years to Katie. You
Yep.
have three children. You're president of a large and accelerating, sort of in terms of growth, organization. How do you manage the whole work-life balance?
It's not easy. It's not easy. I would say I probably don't do a good job at it, just being transparent. I really don't. My kids play softball, and I spend a lot of time with them. My son just likes hanging out and fishing and watching Scooby-Doo. And so I do everything I can just to spend whatever moments we can with them. And we live a busy life. My kids, unfortunately inherited, or I guess fortunately in the long term, but at this age, unfortunately inherited my burden, I would say, of overworking. And they spend so much time on schoolwork and softball and some of this other stuff. They're already taking PSATs at 12 and 11 years old. And so it's not easy, and we try to balance things, and but it is one of my weaknesses and one of the struggles. So I'll tell you, just being transparent is something that I don't do a good job at.
Sure. You did talk about your experience in Iraq. You talked about towards the end, there was an IED explosion that you were involved in. And you recently had a medical situation that was rather serious. Can you tell us about it? And can you tell us sort of what you've learned from that whole experience?
Yeah, so last year in July, I woke up in the middle of the night, about 3 o'clock in the morning, crying, believe it or not, in my sleep. And I had this sharp pain down my neck and back. So because of the military, I've got 4 displaced discs in my lower back and 3 in my neck. And so I've always had issues. We've done, therapy, and we've done different strength training and things like that, but I don't know what caused it. However, I woke up in the middle of the night and I couldn't move my arms and was shooting pain. And to make the story a little short, so went and got MRIs. What had happened was 2 discs in my neck had slipped and were pinching my spinal cord. And that's why I had a hard time moving my arms. So they did emergency surgery. Dr. Lindley here in Savannah, who did a fantastic job, did my surgery really quickly within a matter of days. And I would say it was a moment in my life where I decided to turn to maybe the next chapter in my life and started to really focus on exactly what you just brought up, David, spending more time with the family, spending more time on personal health and those sort of things. So.
Can you tell us about a time when you failed as a leader and what you learned from it?
Yeah, so many times in the military, there was a lot of failures. And I'll tell you, instead of going into a lot of detail, I'll tell you one. There was a particular soldier that I really felt like I could get him where he needed to be. And I think looking back in hindsight, I was bullheaded and young and too tenacious and pushed way too hard. And actually saw someone, leave the military. It was on a 3-year term, came up on his term, and it's someone that I really thought could be a lifer. He decided to get out, and that weighed pretty heavy on me. And I saw it as a moment of where I had to understand leadership style and flavor with different people, as opposed to having this one general leadership style with everyone that worked for me. That sometimes the hard-nosed, pass or fail approach doesn't always work. And some people are motivated in different ways. It was a real turning point in my life. And I'll tell you, I was young, I was 22 years old, and it made me realize, even at that young age, that there's a time and place for leadership styles, and you have to start being able to read the people, read what motivates them. And what happened for me, the biggest lesson I took from that was that, trying to understand the person first before trying to put the mission on the person was just as important. And, every situation is going to be different. And it was actually shortly before I went and got certified in situational leadership in the military and started understanding that from a broader perspective. And so that was one that I'll tell you that it still bothers me today, where I look at someone that really could have been extremely successful in a career that I possibly was their roadblock. In my opinion, I was their roadblock. And that came from my leadership style. So it was a learning lesson and I actually think you and I have talked about it before, David, where you realize that, sometimes you can push people so hard that they start, I'd use the analogy, go to the well so many times, eventually go to the well and there's no water anymore. Yeah. So that was a big one for me, and something that I've definitely kept in those sort of that learning book of tools and that leadership tool guide that I sort of keep in my brain going all the time.
Very good. I have two more questions, and then I'll turn it back over to Jeff to see if we have any questions, and also then to wrap things up. So other than your family, what accomplishment are you most proud of?
Well, I'll tell you that Parker's has become my life over the past, since 2012, and even before that a little bit as a customer, but it's become where I tell people I bleed green and blue. And there's a lot of things that have happened here that I feel just so proud of. We've built an unbelievable field department that's just been extremely successful. We've built a district manager training program that you actually had a part of, David, back in 2015, that still to this day is extremely successful. We've built a company-wide training program. And I mean, there's a multitude of things here, our loyalty program, but the sort of close it into one sort of statement is that I've been extremely proud at how this team has just continued to come together and pass through and push through adversity. We're sometimes looking the monster in the face when you're in an industry that in a lot of ways is seeing a lot of headwinds, and we're able to still come together and push through. And for me, I might play a small part in some of these bigger projects, and other projects might play a bigger part, but for me, just having a piece of it, and sometimes even just being an advisor, allows me to put, that ounce of pride into it. And so I'm extremely proud of the things we've done, especially since I've been here at Parker's.
Super. Last question for you, Jeff. Knowing what you know now, what would you tell your 18-year-old self?
Wow, that's a really good question. I would say, a lot of times so I have a very high energy personality. And a lot of times, it's sort of, I see myself going on emotional roller coasters because of outward decision making, right? Basically something outside of your own control. And so the thing I would tell my 18-year-old self that's taken me, 16 years and probably will still take me another 20 to really fully realize is that, as much as others can influence you, as much as they can affect you, is that, you can't let that happen. And so you gotta stay true to your path and keep working on what you want to accomplish.
Very good. Great. Jeff Bush, President of Parker's, thank you so much for your time today. Greatly appreciate it. And
yes, Jeff, thank you very much. I just had one question. In terms of the pandemic, and I'm sure your team is like a lot of us, that it seems like we've been working from 7 to 11 every day, and it's almost like we've taken on 2 jobs. So how have you managed your team, and have you managed your team any differently? Are there any concerns that you've kind of, had with say burnout, with work-life balance? How have you how have you managed that with your team?
So great question. And I have 2 answers to that. One is, in a moment of any sort of acute anxiety for your team, whether it's a pandemic or things we've experienced in the military, your role as a leader is to be even keeled. Your role is not only to set the standard from an experience or a mission standpoint or an objective standpoint, but your role as a leader is also to set the emotional standard. And so people are looking to you, and so your emotions are what they're going to feed off of. And so for me, my most important piece of this over the past 4, 5, 6 months here has been even keeled and being that pillar for this team and making sure there's someone who's going to be the emotional standard bearer You know, I'm not going to let my emotions ramp up. I'm not going to let anxiety get the best of me. And the second thing I would say is giving them leeway to take time when they need it. You know, not being stringent or strict when they need to take a breather, whether it's a day or 2 days or 3 days or whatever, making sure they have that time to get that refresher and re-energize.
Okay, thank you. I'm looking in the chat. I don't see any questions at this point in time. Does anyone have any questions that they would like to ask Jeff or post in the group chat?
Like I told David, I'm an open book.
I know that we're kind of at the top of the hour here, but
yeah.
Not seeing any. I do want to certainly want to thank both Jeff for participating in our discussion today, as well as David Harper for hosting and conducting the interview. I'd also like to thank Andrew Riley and United WebWorks for sponsoring today's meeting. Our next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, August 26th. In the near future, we will be conducting our annual survey, which helps us determine discussion topics and speakers for the future. If you would like to sponsor a future meeting, please contact Roy Austin at our email address at cfocouncilsavannah@gmail.com. If you would like to speak at one of our meetings or have an idea about a speaker or topic, please contact Rebecca Vincent at the same address.
With that, Jeff, I will launch the quote unquote, the CPE poll.
Okay.
So if you need CPE, would you please respond accordingly? We will then send out CPE to those who said that they do need CPE credit. So. All right, so.
And I did have one question from Andrew. Jeff, when did you know it was time to engage an outside consultant?
I think, you know, the toughest thing for me in business has always been, and kind of what I spoke to a little bit earlier, is being willing to admit you don't know something you don't know. And so there's a lot of times we've engaged, whether it was designing our loyalty program, designing our mobile app, or even trying to start venturing in what Andrew does. You know, we had to engage outside counsel and outside consultants. If he's referring to the operational side of things, again, that goes back to, you know, sort of just experiencing what we don't know. We thought we had a tried and true program. We brought David in, and David showed us something on a professional level that we hadn't experienced yet. And so, you know, I think a lot of times it's not necessarily knowing the when. It's you know, to me, I would say the earlier the better, because you can always stop it, right? So if you always say, okay, well, maybe I didn't really need a consultant in this avenue, you can stop it. But if you wait too late, you could make a lot of mistakes and go down the wrong fork in the road, and then have to backtrack, have to, you know, eat a lot of expenses, whatever the case may be.
Well, thank you. Okay, well, I think it's 2 o'clock. Again, thank you very much. It was a very interesting discussion, and good luck in your role at Parker's. I do have one final question. Why is gas cheaper in South Carolina than Georgia?
So I got a great answer, because there's an actual answer to that.
Yeah.
You can thank gas tax. So in South Carolina, the taxes are just over 17 cents cheaper on taxes on fuel than it is in Georgia. Yep. And what's interesting for us is, because we have stores right on the line of both sides, right, we see that flip, you know, when gas tax changes, like it did about 5 or 6 years ago, when South Carolina became 16, 17 cents cheaper, we saw all of our traffic go right over the line. Right. Yeah, but that's the answer. Yeah, that's actually the answer. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. And thank you everyone today for participating in the meeting. And with that, our meeting is over, and have a nice day and stay safe.
Jeff, David, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeff.